Above the canyon, the pilot of the helicopter 215KA was sitting at a helibase preparing to go refuel, but then he heard Eric's final transmissions. He immediately lifted off and radio ASM2. They both began prowling over the flaming hills looking for Granite Mountain. The smoke over the box canyon was so heavy by now that neither crew could see through the ground. The pilot, Granite Mountain, do you copy? Static blared on the radio. Someone was thumbing the mic on his radio but uttering no sound. We're working our way around there, the pilot called. We've got several aircraft coming to you. We'll see if we can't take care of business for you. No response. I need you to pay attention, the pilot said, and tell me when you hear the aircraft, okay? Because it's going to be a little tough for us to see you. With visuals gone, they would try to home in on Granite Mountain's position by sound. Granite Mountain's radio clicked again and stayed down. The channel was open at their end and broadcasting. There was a loud, pulsing sound, like a hammer hit at length of sheet metal, but no voices. There was also the sound of rushing air, which must have been the firestorm moving across the canyon. The pilot, Division Alpha, Bravo 3-3, do you hear a helicopter? 3 fast clicks on the radio. Someone in Granite Mountain was hitting the transmission button, but not saying anything. At Boulder Springs Ranch, the bomb-proof safety zone that the fire supervisors had identified that morning, the owner was unaware of what was happening in the box canyon a couple hundred yards from her front door. She walked out of the handsome wooden home to check on her dog, who was roaming around outside. She looked to her left and saw a black wall of smoke, hemmed but hot flame, roaring toward the ranch. She yelled to her husband and ran for the pen where her numerous animals were exposed. Her husband dashed to the barn, throwing open the door. With the roar of the fire concussing the air, the two herded their animals into the barn and shut the door. They raced back to their home. They weren't inside more than a minute when the fire rushed over the ranch and began burning to the south. Their home and the barn were unharmed. Having built with fire-resistant materials and scrupulously clearing the grounds of brush, the owners and their animals survived. The ranch had indeed proved to be bomb-proof. At the restaurant, I could see the ridge of the box canyon. We were all watching the brown and black smoke coiling and twisting as flames surged up the slope. Finally, the fire gained the top of the ridge and shot 150 feet in the air. I felt nauseous. If Granite Mountain was anywhere near that, I didn't finish that thought. I was trying to keep the dark thoughts at bay. They got out, I kept telling myself. They dropped their radios, but they made it. I'll see them soon. Voices on the radio. Operations 3-3. Any communications yet? No, negative. Tanker 910 thought she heard him, but I've been unable to get anything. Do you have a firm location where they're at? No. I would say southeast corner of the fire. That's the best I can do for you right now. In Yarnell proper, it was dark as if night had settled overhead. Security cameras sensed the alteration in light and changed from day to night mode. Vehicles moving out to Route 89 switched on their headlights to see through the drafts of smoke and embers. The emergency lights of ambulances flashed as they carried bewildered residents toward open spaces. The faces in the windows looked pale, shocked. It was just chaos now, no order. You didn't know where the fire was. You had a feeling that you could turn a corner and it would spring at you from a line of brush, coming at you faster than you could run, and you'd be done. Nowhere was safe. Time was starting to break down, or perhaps it was my grip on it. I was waiting for my brothers to come trudging down the road, their faces caked with smoked residue, their white teeth showing through the black. I started talking to God in my mind. I asked him to take me and let my friends survive. I would have gladly laid down in the flames at that moment if it meant my brothers could live. Other firefighters began to measure time by the last call from Granite Mountain. How long's it been? One called another. 30 minutes? Fire officials initiated a medical response. They asked 5 paramedics and 3 EMTs who were stranded at the restaurant to make themselves ready. They issued a call for 5 medevac helicopters. They set up a triage center and notified a nearby burn unit they might be getting injured patients from Yarnell. I was running around scrounging up medical supplies and getting them ready for when Granite Mountain came in. They might be burned. They might need oxygen for their scarred lungs. I would be ready for them. Once I got in all the stuff, I monitored the radios and prayed for Jesse or Eric to say they were all right. The fire was still raging, but Brian Frisbee and Rogers Trueheart Brown, Blue Ridge's crew captain, decided to go in on the UTVs. I helped them get their gear together, and when they were ready, I went up to Brian. Bring them back. I said, please bring my brothers back. He nodded. Brian and Rogers jumped on a UTV and Brian revved it up, then put it into gear. Other firefighters, hearing about the deployment on the radio, rushed in to join them. Supervisors were repeatedly trying to raise Eric on the radio, but there was only silence. Not even static or clicking. The UTVs zigzagged through Yarnell on their way to the 2-track road. They drove through the outskirts of the town into a pale of light gray smoke lit by orange spot fires to their left and right. Burned-out homes showed as a series of blackened rectangles, door frames, all that was left of the structures. Trucks in their driveways tottered on metal tires. The air was still choking hot, and burned tree limbs crunched beneath the UTV's wheels. The hotshots probed ahead, calling to each other to watch the power lines, which sagged in the heat. At times it seemed like the fire ahead was not the remnants of a firewall, but the flank of it, sweeping around for another run through town. "Fuck it," one firefighter cried. "Let's go for it." They found a dirt track. Their engines growled, and the tires thudded on the rutted road as they made their way up slope, palls of tan-gray smoke. There was less fire out there than in the town. The crew of a helicopter known as Ranger 58 heard the radio traffic and loaded medical gear into the cabin before taking off at 5:16 p.m. They flew to the last reported position of Granite Mountain and hovered over the smoke-enshrouded hill. They spotted what looked like a backpack pump, a portable 5-gallon water bag and nozzle used by firefighters during suppression. They reported their finding on the radio. Did it belong to Eric? They asked me over the radio if Granite Mountain carried backpack pumps. "No, we didn't have them today," I said. "It had to be from someone else. Any idea where they are?" I told them the crew should have been on the 2-track going toward Boulder Springs unless they'd broken off and headed north toward the other ranches in the black. The radio buzz was static. "Can you give me the names of everyone with them?" I started to recite the names of my brothers. The UTVs threaded their way up a path cleared by a dozer. Everything around them was blasted and smoking. When the trail ran out, they dismounted and walked across the tops of canyon ridges, the scene in front of them peaceful now, the pale smoke from the fire lying in the valley like a morning mist, with only the ancient rocky spurs of the hills visible. The men themselves were nowhere in sight. "Come on, Grounit," one of the firefighters called out. "Let's hear you talk." The Ranger 58 pilot turned his craft toward Boulder Springs Ranch. He recalled the earlier transmission. Granite Mountain had set this ranch as their safety zone. At 6:10 p.m., the smoke was slowly clearing, and the pilot spotted something glinting down below. He realized it was a series of deployment shelters located on the floor of the Box Canyon. From above, the canyon looked moonscaped, everything except stone and hardy tree branches carbonized by the firestorm. The pilot got on the radio and called in the location. The canyon lay approximately 1 mile southeast of Granite's last reported position. The pilot brought his helicopter down and landed 500 yards away from the shelters, which were being tugged across the ground by a light breeze. Eric Tarr, the flight medic, grabbed a first aid bag and jumped out. He marched toward the shelters, talking into a radio clipped to his shoulder. The landscape was something out of a Brothers Grimm forest, partially exploded granite boulders set alongside blackened, twisted manzanita branches. The fire was moving so fast when it came through it didn't have time to burn the trees themselves. Nothing green had been left behind. The ground was smoking. Tar had a water tube connected to a backpack, and he sipped on it as he walked, trying to alleviate the terrific heat. Suddenly he heard voices up ahead. He was stunned. It seemed incredible that anything could have survived what had just come through this canyon. But Tar quickened his pace and reached the shelters. The foil was glinting and moving in the wind like silvery fish flinting through backwater. Tar called out. As he reached the deployment zone, Tar saw bodies laid on the ground in 24 by 30-foot space, arrayed in a rough horseshoe. 7 of the hotshots were still inside the shelters. The voices he heard came from Granite Mountain radios, which were scattered on the ground. Somehow the radios had survived the flames. Everyone at the restaurant had stopped to listen. "Yeah, Todd," Tar said over the radio. "On scene. 18 confirmed." He'd miscounted by 1. There were actually 19 bodies. Boulder Spring Ranch lay 600 yards away. I was sitting in one of the Granite Mountain buggies. A cell phone went off behind me. I looked back. Then another. I knew the news of the tragedy was just filtering out into Prescott, and the families of the 19 men were calling their loved ones to find out if they were safe. Each ping represented a mother or a wife or a father or brother hoping a voice they knew would answer. I didn't know what to do. I got out of the buggy and walked down the road until I couldn't hear the phones chirping anymore.